But the people of Israel misappropriated some of the goods set aside to be destroyed. For Achan, the son of Carmi, the son of Zabdi, the son of Zerach, the tribe of Yehuda, took some of the things reserved for destruction. In consequence, the anger of Adonai blazed up against the people of Israel. Yehoshua sent men from Jericho to Ai, which is next to Beit Aven, east of Beit El, telling them to go up and spy out the land. So the men went up, reconnoitered Ai, returned to Yehoshua and told him, "Don't have all the people go up, but let perhaps 2,000 or 3,000 men go up and attack Ai. There's no point in making all the people exert themselves to get there, because they are only a few of them." So from the people, about 3,000 men went up there, but they were routed by the men of Ai. And the men of Ai killed some 36 of them and chased them from before their gate all the way to Shavarim, attacking them in the desert. The hearts of the people melted and turned to water. Yehoshua tore his clothes and fell to his face in the ground before the ark of Adonai until evening, he and the leaders of Israel, and they put dust on their heads. Yehoshua said, "Oh, Adonai Elohim, why did you take the trouble to bring this people across the Yarden if you meant to hand us over to the Emori and have us perish? We should have been satisfied to live on the other side of the Yarden. Oh, Adonai, what can I say after Israel has turned their backs and retreated before their enemies? For when the Canaani and the other people living in the land hear about it, they will surround us and wipe us off the face of the earth. What will you do then to save the honor of your great name?" Adonai said to Yehoshua, "Stand up. Are you lying face down? Israel has sinned. Yes, they have violated my covenant, which I commanded them. They have taken what has been set aside for destruction. They have stolen it, lied about it, and put it in their own things. This is why the people of Israel cannot stand before their enemies. They turn their backs on their enemies because they have come under a curse. I won't be with you unless you destroy the things meant for destruction that you have with you. So get up, consecrate yourselves, and say, 'Consecrate yourselves in the preparation for tomorrow. For here is what Adonai, the God of Israel, says. Israel, you have things under the curse of destruction among you. You will not be able to stand before your enemies until you remove the things that have been destroyed from among you. Therefore, tomorrow morning you are to come forward, one tribe at a time. The tribe Adonai takes is to come forward, one family at a time. The family Adonai takes is to come forward, one household at a time. The household of Adonai takes is to come forward, one person at a time. The person who was caught with these things in his possession that were reserved for destruction is to be burned to ashes, he and everything he has, because he has violated the covenant of Adonai, has committed a shameful deed in Israel." So Yehoshua got up early in the morning and had Israel come forward, one tribe at a time. The tribe of Yehuda was taken. He had the families of Yehuda come forward and take the family of Zarki. He had the Zarki family come forward, and by household leaders, Zavdi was taken. He was a household come forward, one person at a time, and Achan, the son of Carmi, the son of Zavdi, the son of Zerach, the tribe of Yehuda was taken. Yehoshua said to Achan, "My son, swear to Adonai, the God of Israel, that you will tell the truth and confess to him. Tell me, now, what did you do? Didn't you hide? Don't hide anything from me." Achan answered Yehoshua, "It is true. I have sinned against Adonai, the God of Israel. Here is exactly what I did. I saw that there was a spoil, a beautiful robe of Shinar, 5 pounds of silver shekel, and 1/3 pound of wedge of gold. I really wanted them, so I took them. You will find them hidden in the ground inside my tent, with the silver underneath." Yehoshua sent messengers. They ran to the tent. It was all there, hidden in his tent, including the silver underneath. Then he took the things from inside the tent, brought them to Yehoshua and all the people of Israel, and put them down before Adonai. Yehoshua, together with all Israel, took Achan, the son of Zerach, with the silver, the robe, the gold wedge, his sons, his daughters, his cattle, his donkeys, his sheep, his tent, and everything he had, and brought them up to Achor Valley. Yehoshua said, "Why have you brought this trouble on us? Today Adonai will bring trouble on you." Then all Israel stoned him to death. They burned them to ashes and stoned them. Over him they piled a great mound of stones, which are there to this day. Finally Adonai turned away from his fierce anger. This is why that place is called the Valley of Achor, trouble to this day. Adonai said to Yehoshua, "Don't be afraid or fall into despair. Take all the people who can fight with you, set out and go to Ai, because now I have handed over the king of Ai, his people, his city, and his land. Do to Ai and its kings as you are to did to Jericho and its kings. But this time, take its spoil and cattle as booty for yourself. Ambush the city from behind." So Yehoshua set out for Ai with all the people who could fight. Yehoshua chose 30,000 men and most courageous of his troops. He sent them out by night. He instructed them, "You are to lie in wait to ambush the city from behind. Stay close to the city, and all of you, be ready. I and all the troops with me will approach the city, and when they come out to attack us as they did before, we will run away from them. They will chase us until we have drawn them away from the city, because they will say, 'They're running away from us, as they did before, so we'll run from them.' Then you will jump up from your ambush and position and take possession of the city. For Adonai your God will hand it over to you. When you have captured the city, you are to set it on fire, do according to what Adonai has said. Those are your orders." Yehoshua sent them away. They took place for the ambush, staying between Bet-El and Ai, to the west of Ai, while Yehoshua camped that night with the people. Yehoshua got up early in the morning, mustered his men, and went up to Ai, ahead of the people, he and the leaders of Israel. All the troops marching with him went up, advanced around the front of the city, and camped on the north side of Ai, with the valley between him and Ai. Then he took about 5,000 men, set them in ambush between Bet-El and Ai, to the west of Ai. Thus the people arrayed themselves with all the army at the north of the city, and their rear guard lying in wait to the west of the city. Yehoshua spent that night in the valley. The king of Ai saw this, so the men in the city hurried out early in the morning to battle against Israel, he and all his people, at a meeting place facing the Arava, but was unaware that behind the city an ambush had been laid against him. Yehoshua and all Israel made as if they had been defeated before them and ran off the road in the desert. All the people of Ai were summoned together to pursue them, so they chased Yehoshua and were drawn away from the city. Not a man was left in Ai or Bet-El who had not gone after Israel. Pursuing Israel, they left the city wide open. When Adonai said to Yehoshua, "Point the spear in your hand toward Ai, because I will hand it over to you," Yehoshua pointed the spear in his hand toward the city. The men in ambush jumped up quickly from their place. The moment he stretched out his hand, they ran, entered the city, and captured it. They hurried to set the city on fire. When the men of Ai looked behind them, they saw it. There was smoke from the city rising to the sky. They had no power to flee this way or that, at which point the people who had run off toward the desert turned back on the pursuers. When Yehoshua and all Israel saw that the ambush had captured the city and that the smoke of the city was going up, they turned back and slaughtered the men of Ai. All the others came out of the city against them too, so they were surrounded by Israel. With some of them on the side and some of them on the side, they attacked them, allowing none to remain or escape. They took the king of Ai alive and brought him to Yehoshua. When Israel had finished slaughtering all the inhabitants of Ai in the countryside, in the desert where they had pursued them, and they had fallen, consumed by the sword, they, all Israel, returned to Ai and defeated it with the sword. 12,000 men and women fell that day, everyone in Ai. For Yehoshua did not withdraw his hand, which he had used to point the spear, till he had utterly destroyed all the inhabitants of Ai. Only the livestock and the spoil of that city did Israel take as booty for themselves, in keeping with the order of Adonai had given Yehoshua. So Yehoshua burned down Ai and turned it into a tell forever, so that it remains a ruin to this day. The king of Ai, he hanged on a tree until evening. At sundown, Yehoshua gave an order, and they took his carcass down from the tree, threw it at the entrance of the city of the gate, and piled a big heap of stones, which is there to this day. Then Yehoshua built an altar to God, an altar to Adonai, the God of Israel, on Mount Evel, as Moshe, the servant of Adonai, had ordered the people of Israel to do. This is written in the book of the Torah of Moshe. An altar of uncut stones that no one had touched with an iron tool. On it they offered the burnt offering of Adonai and sacrificed a peace offering. He wrote there on the stone a copy of the Torah of Moshe, inscribed it in the presence of the people of Israel. Then all Israel, including their leaders, officials, and judges, stood on the other side of the ark in front of the Kohanim, who were the Leviim, and who carried the ark of the covenant of Adonai. The foreigners were there along with the citizens. Half of the people were in front of Mount Gerizim, and half of them on front of Mount Evel, as Moshe, the servant of Adonai, had ordered them earlier in connection with blessing the people of Israel. After this, he read all the words of the Torah, the blessing and the curse, according to everything written in the book of the Torah. There was not a word of everything Moshe had ordered that Yehoshua did not read before all Israel assembled, including the women, the little ones, and the foreigners living with them. When all the kings of the west side of the Jordan and the hills and the Shephelah, and all along the shore of the great sea, front the Lebanon, the Hittite, the Amori, the Canaanite, the Perizzite, the Hivi, the Yebusi, heard what happened, they joined forces to fight together against Yehoshua and Israel. But when the inhabitants of Givah heard that Yehoshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they developed a clever deception. They made themselves look as if they had a long journey, put old sacks on their donkeys, and taking used wineskins that had burst and been mended back together, they put old patched sandals on their feet and dressed in worn-out clothes and took provisions. Nothing but dried-up bread was crumbling to pieces. And they went to Yehoshua in the camp of Gilgal and said to him, the men of Israel, "We have come from a country far away. Now make a covenant with us." The men of Israel said to the Hivi, "How do we know that you don't live here among us? If you do, I don't want to make a covenant with you." But he answered Yehoshua, "We are your servants." Yehoshua asked, "Who are you? Where are you come from?" They answered him, "Your servants have come from a very distant country because of the reputation of Adonai your God. We have heard reports about him, everything he did in Egypt and everything he did to the two kings of the Emir across the Jordan, Sihon, king of Heshbon, and Og, king of Bashan, at Ashtaroth. So our leaders and all the people living in the country said to us, 'Take provisions with you for your journey. Go to meet him and say to them, "You are your servants, and now making a covenant with us. Here is the bread which we took our provisions. It is still warm. We took it out of our homes the day we left to come to you. Now look at it. It's dry and turned to crumbs. These wineskins were new when we filled them, but look, now they're torn. Likewise, these clothes of ours, our shoes are worn out because of a very long journey." People sampled some of their food, but didn't seek the advice of Adonai. So Yehoshua made peace with them and made a covenant with them to spare their lives. And leading officials of the community swore to them. By 3 days later, after they had made the covenant with them, they heard that they were their neighbors, that they had lived there with them. The people of Israel traveled and arrived at their cities on the third day. Their cities were Givon, Kephra, Be'erot, and Kiryat Yearim. The people of Israel did not attack them because the leading officials of the community had sworn to them by Adonai, the God of Israel. But all the community grumbled against the leaders. However, the leaders replied to the whole community, "We have sworn to them by Adonai our God, Israel, the God of Israel. So we can't touch them. Here's what we will do to them. We will let them live, so that God's anger will not be on us because of the oath we swore to them. Yes, let them live. Leaders continued, let them chop wood and draw water for the whole community. This is what the leaders said. Yehoshua summoned them and said to them, why have you deceived us by saying we come from a place very far away, when in fact you are living right here with us? Now you have a curse on you. You'll be slaves forever, supplying people to chop wood and draw water for the house of God. They answered Yehoshua, it is because we heard the reports that Adonai your God had ordered his servant Moshe to give you all the land and to destroy all the inhabitants of the land ahead of you. So we were terrified for our lives on account of you. That's why we did this. Now, as you see, we are in your hands. Do to us whatever seems good and right to you. So Yehoshua did exactly that. He saved them from the power of the people of Israel so that they didn't kill them. But he did the same day make them choppers of wood and drawers of water for the community, for the altar of Adonai in the place which he would choose. And they remain so to this day.